Thomas Goldkamp here with Justin Wells of GatorCountry.com. The Florida Gators have just signed 23 members to their 2012 recruiting class with 6 early enrollees. Justin Wells and I are here to recap them and kind of provide some insight as to where Florida met their needs and where Florida didn't.
Yeah, Thomas, we just heard from Will Muschamp. He just finished up his National Signing Day press conference, so very interesting to hear some of his remarks on this signing class for the Gators for the class of 2012.
Now, I know the quarterback position was one that Florida kind of jumped into the race a little bit late for the quarterback that they landed, Skylar Mornhinweg. What did Will Muschamp have to say about the quarterback position?
Well, he said they want to sign a quarterback every year, and when Brent Pease got to Florida, the new offensive coordinator, they identified Skylar Mornhinweg as their guy, and they pretty much put all their effort in recruiting him, and he went ahead and accepted the offer from the Gators and committed to Florida last week. So it was a big get for the Gators. I think they met their needs in getting that one guy at the quarterback position.
Now, another position that they got one guy at was at running back, where maybe Florida would have liked to have landed an extra guy, but they did get Matt Jones into the signing class. He's a 6'3", about 213-pound running back, so he offers a little bit more of what Will Muschamp really just described as toughness, where he's going to be the guy that can get that 4th and 1 for the Gators that they really lacked all year last year.
Yeah, well, that's what they're hoping for. I personally haven't seen what he's talking about out of Matt Jones at the high school level, but he's a big back, he is powerful, I think he does have that toughness in him. I think for Florida, it's going to be about developing Matt Jones as a running back, getting him to play tough between the tackles. You know, I give you an example, a guy like Trent Richardson, who wasn't exactly a power running back in high school, but had that ability, had the potential to do that, got to Alabama, Nick Saban and his staff kind of brought that out of him, and he developed into the back he is. I think Florida's hoping for more of the same out of Matt Jones.
Now, another position where they may need some development, they certainly didn't have the type of production at this position that they would like last year, and that's the wide receiver position, where Florida came into the day with only one commitment from LaTroy Pittman, who's been committed through the entire coaching change from Urban Meyer to Will Muschamp. So he's a guy that really helped keep the class together, and he's a very solid prospect. But Florida also had 2 major receivers on the board. Obviously, Stephon Diggs, one of the top-rated receivers in the country, won't decide until February 10th, and so the Gators are still kind of waiting on him. But the other guy that they were really interested in and really wanted to be in this class was Nelson Aguilar out of Tampa.
That's right, Thomas. And Florida did get 2. They got LaTroy Pittman and Rafael Andreas, as we finally found out how to pronounce his name at the press conference today. Andreas is a guy that, as Will Muschamp said, he camped at Florida. He impressed the staff. He was a guy that was on the board the whole time, even though people really didn't talk about him. So I think Florida did a good job of getting those 2 receivers so far, in Pittman and Andreas. They're 2 a little bigger receivers than what they've been recruiting the last few years. Now, if they can get Stephon Diggs, that will really be the icing on the cake. That's the guy they really need to get, because they need to get that deep vertical threat in this offense, looking into next fall to kind of, give the Gators some big playmaking potential.
Now, I know the offensive line was also a position where Florida needed a lot of bodies. Will Muschamp said initially that he wanted 4 to 5 guys. How did Florida do there?
Well, Florida only signed 2. They got DJ Humphreys and Jess Dunker. Both guys enrolled early. Both are very high-quality prospects. But if you look at, like you said, the numbers, Florida really wanted to get probably 4 guys. They only got 2. Now, if you look at the defensive line, maybe one of those guys ends up on offense because they signed a bunch on the defensive line. But for now, at least, while Florida did get some quality in the class of 2012, they lack the numbers, and that's something they're going to have to look to sign next year for 2013.
And that's another thing that Muschamp mentioned in his press conference, is that they signed so many guys on the defensive side of the ball this year that naturally part of the focus next year will be on filling out some of those holes on the offensive side.
Right.
Moving over to the defensive side, you mentioned that they did sign a heck of a lot of defensive linemen. That was an area where he said they really kind of struggled last year because they were forced to cross-train some guys at the defensive end and defensive tackle position. You look down on the signing list at who they signed, and they got plenty of talent coming in on the defensive line.
Yeah, if you look at the front 7, really, because with a 4-3-3-4 multiple front look, those guys, a lot of them are interchangeable. It's a very deep class. They got a couple of defensive tackles. They got Jafar Mann, Omari Phillips, and also Damian Jacobs. So they got 3 there. They got a few defensive ends. Jonathan Bullard was a big one. Quintez Williams, another big one. Alex McAllister and Dante Fowler, both possible Buck candidates. And then even moving to linebacker, Antonio Morrison and Jeremy Powell. So there's a lot of talent in those spots. They really signed a lot of bodies, as you said. And that will help with the depth for next year, because that is an area where the Gators wore down, especially in that stretch in the middle of the season where they lost 4 straight in October. They just didn't have the bodies up front on defense to be able to hold off opponents, and I think now they've kind of reloaded and built up some depth on the defensive front heading into next year.
Now, obviously, Dante Fowler is the big surprise of the group, kind of the signing day shocker for this year's Gators class. He was previously committed to FSU coming into today and ended up choosing Florida. So that's a big steal for Florida. He's a consensus top 50 defensive lineman at a position where they really need it, where he can play that buck and maybe even some Sam linebacker for Florida.
Yeah, he's an elite pass rusher too, and Florida really needed that in this class, and they got one of those guys in Dante Fowler.
And then kind of wrapping things up, what did you see out of Florida's defensive back class? I know Florida had obviously a big defensive back class last year with several talented guys. How did they do this year?
They did pretty well to follow up on that group. Marcus May and Brian Poole are, are both All-Americans. Poole is a corner, May is a safety. And then they had 2 nice little kind of sleeper under the radar prospects to round out the group. Willie Bailey out of Hallandale, 6'1" corner, already enrolled early. He needs to gain some weight, but he's a long, talented prospect. Certainly gives Florida some of that height they're looking for at the cornerback position. And then Raheem Ledbetter, who of course is the teammate of Jonathan Bullard, Brandon Spike's cousin, a very physical, strong safety prospect. Definitely a nice get for the Gators, and he's a guy who I feel like helps bring a little physicality to the Florida defense.
So wrapping up our coverage from National Signing Day, I'm here with Justin Wells, Thomas Goldkamp. The Gators really kind of met some of their needs, but maybe came up a little bit shorter than they would have liked on the offensive side of the ball. That's obviously an area they'll target next year. But overall, you have to be pleased with the signing class that Florida signed.
Yeah, it definitely is a good class, and if Florida can add Stephon Diggs next Friday, then I think it's a really good group.
Signing off from the Swamp, I'm Thomas Goldkamp with Justin Wells. Be sure to tune in to GatorCountry.com for more National Signing Day coverage.